and I will upload this on my, I will have a private YouTube account, and I will upload it there. So just in case if somebody missed it or somebody wants to review it, you can just go through there, so you don't have to record. I mean, you can record yourself as well, but it's better just in case if you want to refresh some topic. Okay. All right. So um, here's the algorithm. So I created a function called is prime, okay, which takes a number as an argument. It could be number or something else, doesn't matter. We have to basically um, cover the corner cases. Um, and first you can look at if a number is an integer or not. So JavaScript has a method. If it's not an integer, we're just going to return false, which means it's not a prime number. Second thing is, remember, 0 and 1 are not prime numbers. So if it's less than 2, then we can easily say that it's not a prime number, right? And also all the odd numbers, all the even numbers are not prime numbers, except 1, which is 2. So if you cover n equal to 2 first, and then so if you say if n is equal to 2, then it's a prime number. Else all the other even numbers are not prime, right? So you return false. So any garbage, Boolean strings that somebody enters, it's not a prime. Could be negative number as well, or floating points. Anything that is under 2 is not a prime number, and anything that is even but not 2 is not a prime number, okay? All right, so here, this is an important loop. So then you will loop from number 3 to n minus 1. Why n minus 1? Obviously because you don't want n to be, because you can divide n by n. That will be a simplest algorithm, right? So if I want to find out if 17 is a prime number or not, then I will start from 3 to 16. Okay. Now that's the complexity of that would be n, because I have to go through every single number and divide n by that and try to figure out if something is a prime or not, right? Which is quite a bit. But if you know about the prime number theory, this is a solution. So we need to only go up to square root of n. And that is because, and that's the main part, the mathematical part, right? So let's say if you have a number n, which is made of what, x and y, right? 2 factors. Okay. Now in this case, the 2 possibility x and y can be equal, right? Or x is less than y, right? All right. So we can say x is less than equal to y. And we're going to look at it in a number as well. Okay. Now if I multiply both by x, I would get x squared less than equal to x and y. Okay. Now x, y is nothing but n, right? So we can simply say x squared is less than n, less than equal to n, or you can simply do square root of x is less than equal to square root of n. That's why we get this. So if I want to look at that in a number, let's say if I get 6, for example, right? So 6, the factors of 6 equal to, either you would do 2 multiplied by 3. Obviously 3 multiplied by 2 is the same thing. And then you get 1 multiplied by 6, right? If you look at the smallest one, which is 1, and 2, which is less than the square root of 6, right? So we don't need to go 3 and 6, right? That's a trick. So that's why you just go square root. And then because I have covered all the even numbers here, I don't really have to go the entire loop. I can simply just say n plus plus n plus plus, which means if I start from 3, then it would do 3 and it would ignore 4 and it would go 5. So it would go all the odd numbers after 3, right? Yeah. So that's the algorithm. The second one was, I think, let me see. All right. How about this? The second homework, let's cover on next week, since we don't have a lot of time today. I'm just gonna move on with the object, and then we'll look at the second homework. Okay. All right. So let's start with objects. Okay. So we looked at the arrays. Arrays and objects are kind of same in JavaScript. Basically, they are treated the same way. Okay. So if you look at the array, which is, I should say const always, x equal to, you create an array like this. So you have a square bracket and you have some elements, right? What's really happening here is inside you have sort of like a 0th element is 1, first element is 2, and third element, oh, the second element is 3, right? So it has index. So 0 is index, 1 is index. It's always that sorted index, right? That's why I'm saying that arrays are like objects in a way. If I were to build such object, I would, instead of square bracket, let me put it this way. So instead of square bracket, I would have to use curly brackets, right? And within the curly brackets, I can simply do that. I can say 0 and 1. I can do, well, you can have integer as well, but I'm just going to use string, and I'll tell you why in a minute. 2 and 2 as 3, right? But again, we don't have to, in object, we don't really have to have an ordered array. I'm just showing you the representation of x as y, right, in an object form. So if I want to get the the first element from x, which is 1, I would do what? I can do this, right? 0. Same way you can get y 0 as well. Okay. Well, here you have to do this. Okay. So this is how you build objects. Let's say, and this is called literal. Now let's build a real object that makes sense. And this is just to show you that what is the difference between array and object, right? Now let's really build an object that makes sense. So let's say if I have list a profile. Let's take a profile. Okay. Objects have key and value pairs, right? So in a profile, I would have name, and name would be, let's say, John. Okay. And then you would have another key and value pair, age, is 30. Okay. I can also say, is this guy single or not, by putting Boolean. Okay, here I can actually use numbers. So the value can be numbers, strings, basically any type. Okay, it doesn't really matter. But the name is always string. You can have an object. It's quite complex, but you can have like one object. But the key always have to be string. Now you can put it. You can put the quotes like this here, or not. It's your choice. But it's always is a string. Okay. Even though I don't put quotes here, it's still a string. So when do I put quotes here? Let's say if I want to have something like this, last name or something, where I want to have a space in between, and then I would put, as you can see, I'm putting space here, so I can say Smith. Okay, so you can do this way also. If I don't put quotes in the key where I have space in it, it would create problems for me. So always remember to put quotes when you use space in it. But otherwise, you don't need quotes around for the key. Okay, but the value itself can be primitive number, primitive types, or null, or it could be an array or another object. Okay. And again, so the keys here are not sequential. So what are the keys? The name is a key, age single. It doesn't have to be sequential, just like arrays. Okay. So now let's say if I want to have kids for this profile, right? I can have an array here, and let's say the one kid's name is Peter, and another kid name is, let's say, Kate or something. Okay, and if I tidy up, it looks nicer here this way. All right. Now, even with the kids, I can have an each kid can have their own profile. So as I said, arrays are square brackets and objects are curly brackets, right? So instead of Peter, I can say name is Peter, and age is, let's say, 10 or something. Same way I can do for Kate. And 8. Okay. All right, so we have a profile. Now, how do I access this information? So let's say if I want to get name for Peter, for John, I would simply do profile.name. So here's my profile, and name is a direct property inside, right? So this would give me John. Okay. So if I do console.log, let me open the console here. And run this, I would get John here. Um, Again, similarly, you can get age. So you would just say dot age. Um, what if I have a last name here? Remember, we looked at if you have a space here, is let's say Smith. Okay. Then how do you deal with this? So I cannot use dot in this case, right? Because otherwise it would be like last space name. It doesn't make sense. So remember, objects are just like arrays. So you just have to have a square bracket around it, and this would give me the last name. So if I run this, I would get Smith here. Okay. What if I want to get all the kids? Then you simply do dot operator. Again, if the things that are doesn't have space, you can still use the square bracket. It's fine. So if I do name, did I do? Oh, I need to always use the, because it's, remember they are strings, so you always have to use quotes around it. And I get John here. Okay. So you can also use square brackets for accessing properties. A dot is better way to do it most of the time, and I would not even use space unless I have to in the property name. Okay, so if I want to access kids, if I do kids, then it would give me the whole array, right? If I do this, I get the whole array. Actually, if I want to, there's a better syntax called table. If I did, let me clear this. I don't know if you guys know this, but it's really nice. So then I get this table form. And this is really nice because then if my object is much larger, I can see in a table form, and it's really nice. Okay. What if I just want to see one or two fields? I think there's a way to do it. Let's say if I want to see, let's say if this object has 20 fields, right? And I only want to see 2 or 3, then I can pick my fields. I believe you can do it like this. Let's see. Okay, yeah, it works. So then it only filters by age. Okay, so the table, console.table is very useful trick. Okay, it took me a while to figure out. I used to do, I would, you know, if I, without using table, it looks really nasty, right? It's really hard to see things, and you can see how, and you have to look for things, and if this has like a 20 fields, then it becomes very complex. First, you know, since I started it, I found this maybe just like last year. Okay, so this would make your life easier when you're debugging. And even if you do table, it also gives you this array view. Oh, it doesn't give you here. Okay. And anyway, Chrome keeps changing, so it's very hard to find out. All right, so now let's say if I want to get kids age, then all I have to do is profile.kids dot name or age, whatever, right? And it would give me, hold on, kids index. Oh yeah, I have to, yeah, because I cannot simply access the property. because there are multiple kids. So if I do kids age, and then it doesn't really know, right? So I need to decide which kid I want to pick. So let's say if I pick the first kid, then remember in array you have to do square bracket and provide an index, right? And then it would give me 10. Okay. Um, for for JavaScript objects, there is no, you cannot, it doesn't have. Okay, let's look at this. If I look at the dir, which is very important to look how it looks from internally. Ah, they messed this JS fiddle completely up. I'm gonna still stop using it soon. Um, okay, so if you look at its prototype, so here's my profile object, right? If I do dir, it gives you more information. So I see the age, kids, last name, and all that stuff, right? And I would see prototype. So I can see what things I can use. And it doesn't have a lot, actually. Um, and that's a problem because it doesn't it doesn't have an iterator. Remember, if I want to iterate through all the values, it doesn't have an iterator. I have to use like a for in loop or something. Okay. However, if I look at the array, which is here, so kids is an array, right? And it has its, so if I expand the kids, it has a prototype and it has a symbol iterator. Remember last time we looked at it, which means I can use a for off loop to iterate through. But unfortunately, you cannot do with the regular JavaScript object. There is a trick to do it, and I'll show you when I come to that part when we look at the iterators. Um, but yeah, right now, or you can use like the maps, which we might cover today. Okay. So far, any questions? All right. So it looks like everybody's grabbing the knowledge quickly. Okay. Um, how do I? So now we looked at the accessing things, right? What if I want to add something new? It's quite simple. So let's say if I want to add an email address here, then I would do profile dot name of the property. I can simply use this email equal to, and then I can do, xyz at gmail.com or something like this, right? Or I can, as I said, like array syntax, I can do this also. It both works, okay? But we're gonna use dot operator because it's much simpler. And then if I console log profile, you would see this. Right, so if I look at it here, it added the email address. What if I want to delete the email address? Then I would use delete, and I would have to pass this inside. Okay, so this line it would add and this line it would delete. Let's see it, how it works. So now it has been deleted. It should not be inside here. Okay, so it's been deleted from here. Okay, so it's important to know how to do that. how do you check if particular property exists or not? So let's say if I want to check if email exists in the profile or not. Obviously, if you console log profile dot, let's say XYZ doesn't exist, right? Some property that doesn't exist. And if I run it, what it would get? It would give me undefined. So I can obviously check if it's undefined, then it doesn't exist, right? I can check undefined, then it would give me true, right? Okay, I can check that way. But the better way to do it is, but a better way to do. Somebody want to ask some question?
Hemant, I'm John here.
Yeah.
So, how objects will take care of properties like duplicate keys? So,
A duplicate what?
does it allow duplicate keys?
No, it yeah. So that's an important thing. Object doesn't allow duplicate keys. So
so we can assign name colon, some Peter, or some Jim, a name right there, another object, assign the property there.
So if I try to assign it, let's say name equal to, let's say I don't know, Jim or I don't know, Jim or something. Okay, it would overwrite this because it won't. You can have. Let me just do profile, right? Then it overwrites it. So you cannot have duplicate.
But it doesn't give an exception, right? Like,
no, it doesn't.
It won't override the.
No, basically, it basically says that it would say that, okay, yeah, you're trying to override it. Now, if I try to do it here, right? Let's say, okay, what would happen here? Usually, it takes the last one.
Okay.
Okay, so whichever the last one you put in, it takes that one. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But it would see here it says duplicate key. So it depends on your editor. If your editor has set up linting properly, so the linter would go through it and say, okay, yeah, this you have an issue here. But JavaScript itself won't throw an error. Okay. All right. So it has a profile has. So JavaScript object has another important method that actually you can use to find out if a particular property exists or not. So all I want to do is, does the name exist inside here or not? I would say has own property called name. Okay, and if I run this, it gets me true. Now, does anybody know why it has this complex method name called has own property? Okay, that is because, anybody knows? Okay, so, and that is because if you could have, because of the inheritance, you can inherit, I'm not going to go in too much into it, but you could actually have a property in profile's prototype. So this profile can be inheriting some property from its parent, And if you try to access it, has own property means, does it really have its own property or is it inheriting? It's like let's say if I inherit my dad's house, and if somebody says, oh, do you have a house? The answer will be yes. Do you have your own house? Then the answer would be no. It's my parents' house. Okay, because I'm inheriting from my parents. So this actually is the same thing. So if the property exists inside the object here, then it's its own property. But if something that is inheriting from its parent, then it's not. Again, I don't want to go into the prototype inheritance right now because it would confuse you more. Um, but every property that you see here, you can put here and it would be true. Okay, so that's how you can look at it. Um, okay, another thing, important thing is, how do you iterate through all the properties? Remember I said you can use a for in method, and the way to do it is you have a for loop. You can say let uh, prop in profile, which means go through every single property in this profile. And I'm gonna do is console log prop. Okay, now if I run this, I would get all the keys here. Okay, so that's how you do it. Now, um, I believe if you want to, I mean, okay, let's not even just go into the prototype. Uh, just think of this when it's their own property. But when we go to prototype, we'll look at it, because when it comes to JavaScript, you have to be careful about what's your own and what you inheriting from your parent class or parent object, right? Um, but we're not gonna go in here. We'll just right now focus on um, the simple methods that you learn here. Okay. Now, also an important thing to see is this is called object literal. Object literal means you are not using a constructor. Okay. Another way to, so when you just simply do equal to sign and curly brackets, then it's a literal. I can actually create another object using object constructor, and the way to do is this way. Let's say I can say let my car equal to new, I should say const my car equal to new and object. Okay, what is this object? This object is like a master constructor. Again, we're not going to go into too much right now since we're not looking at inheritance, but um, basically when I build a JavaScript object, remember it also has the prototype, right? So if I console log the profile here, I don't have enough space here, but let's see. This JS filter really screwed things up. All right, I'm just gonna remove this here. If I look at it, it's automatically gives me all these prototype methods that is available. One of them we already looked at, the has own property, remember? And there are other ones. We're not going to go into detail right now, but you have all these methods available to you. How does that, where does this come from? So even when you're creating a literal, every literal automatically inherits all this property. From where? So it's getting from the object. So remember when I did this way, let me comment this out. And so if I do const my car equal to new object, and if I console log my car, remember it's an empty object. I don't have anything right now, but it would also have a proto. So this object actually is nothing but it has all the stuff. And you can also directly look at it if I just simply do object. I have to do dir, then you would see it. It's a function, but it has a proto. Okay, so because again because it's a function, it's give you the prototype of a function. But then I wanted to show you where's the there was a prototype for object right here. Right here, you'll get what I showed you. Remember, when you create an object, so it's coming from here actually, but it's kind of invisible to you. But just wanted to show you how it really works. Okay, and again, I will cover this when we do prototype inheritance, but it's important to know where the things are coming from so that when you want to use something, you can figure it out without getting confused. Okay. Okay, so oh yeah, another important method I wanted to cover is JSON.stringify. So if I do this, it would convert into a string. I think something is missing. Oh yeah. I think it's JSON. Oh, JSON, not JSON, not the name JSON. It's not a function. Stringify. All right, so it kind of converted everything to a string. It's a useful method when you take an object and you want to pass it to a server or something. You can do it, and I can convert it back to an object. So if you get a string, you can convert it back to an object. So PARSE, JSON.parse. So I convert it into a string and I'm parsing back into an object. Okay, you parse it back. So those two are important methods to remember. Usually you would use it when you get some AJAX from server side, which is in a string, and then you want to convert into object, you can do this way. Okay. Any questions so far?
Hey, Hema.
Yeah.
So how to check object equality? Like, so for example, you have profile 1 and profile 2.
Yeah.
And both are object literal. So how do you check both are equal? Both objects are equal.
Equal in the sense, because
Object.
Yeah, because it's a reference, right? So okay, so the way, so if I do this, if I create a new profile, and if I just simply do equal to profile, right? This is what you're talking about, and I can do console log new profile. Is it equal to profile?
Right.
Okay. There's more to it, but so it says true. This is called shallow compare. Shallow compare means you just comparing the reference. Okay. Let's say if you have completely two different objects. Let's say if I create a new profile with exactly the same values, right? In that case, if I do equal sign here, it won't say true because it just compares the reference, right? So let's do it. So let's say if I copy it, okay, and why this? Somehow I'm gonna do auto run because somehow it just hides everything if I have more lines. Okay, I'm gonna call this new profile. Okay, now would okay, let me get rid of this line. So now right now they both have exactly the same values, right? But if I do this, it won't be true, obviously. Let me clear this. Okay, yeah, it says false. Yeah, I think JS Fiddle really majorly screwed up. It has some lots of bugs now. You can see it hides the buttons as soon as I move down here. But anyway, yeah. So because it's a completely different object in the memory, even though the values are same. So what you have to do is you can write your own little. If you want to see if they all have the same values, then you have to write your own little code that goes and compares each value, right? Um, and then say, okay, these two have the same values. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are equal. And it gets complex. Even then, you may not be able to completely verify that they are equal because this could have some prototype properties which is not visible here. And so there is another compare called deep compare, where you have to actually compare its prototype as well. We're not going to look at it right now since we haven't covered it, right? Um, yeah. So that's, any more questions?
Hamel, Indra here. So how
Sure.
about cloning an object?
Cloning an object. Yes. Cloning an object is basically, so you understand that there are then there'll be like a two kind of clones, right? You have a shallow clone,
Deep cloning.
and then you have a deep cloning. Shallow cloning means I am going to basically have a profile like this, and I'm creating another profile just like this, but they are different, technically different objects, right? Um, and deep cloning means clone the objects and also clone its prototype. Okay. Uh, in the arrays, you can use. I'm trying to think. In arrays, you can use like a spread operator to clone. I'm not sure if you can do it here. So if in arrays, you can do something like this. So if I have a const x equal to, let's say, 1, 2, and 3, you can clone this. No, I think you can clone. Okay, let's try this. I think you can do this way. New profile equal to profile. Let's see. Okay, and then
do we have any constructor, for cloning?
say it again.
Assign is one. Object.assign can be used to clone.
Oh, okay, yeah, object.assign you can do that, but I think this used to work. Okay, yeah, maybe not. Okay, profile is not iterable. Yeah, object.assign you can do it, so you can do object.assign, and then you can take an empty object and you do profile. And then it clones it also. Yeah. Yeah, but I think the other one used to work. I don't know what happened, but yeah. Yeah, so you can, yeah, I'll get back to you on a spread operator also works, but I don't know, maybe I'm missing some syntax. Yeah, but object or assign would work. It's pretty simple. But it doesn't do deep copy, so you have to. Yeah, but we're not gonna go into right now because it's a different time subject. It's Pandora's box. Once you open it, you keep going deeper and deeper. All right, so anybody looked at my new video on maps and weak maps?
Not at Hemel.
Oh, okay. All right, so let me just quickly cover it. And if you have any question, you can look at the video. But let me just quickly. So objects, we looked at it. They are really good, but then there are multiple issues. And the main issue with the object is, let's say right now the key for the object is you can only have string as a key, right? What if I want to set object as a key? So for example, let's say if I have some object const x equal to some empty object, okay? And if I say profile x equal to let's say just use string. So I'm trying to set object as a key, and the value would be the string x. Kind of weird, but you know what? Let me just open a new. Somehow this is gone. You see how it hides it somehow? I don't know. What's the deal with the JS fill? All right, so So now if I look at the new profile, not new profile, it's a profile. You would see this object, which is X. Okay. You can actually, I can actually get this value if I simply do this. Then it would give me back X here. So it works. Let me remove the auto run from here. Okay. So it works, but it only allows one object. That's a problem. So if I create another object called Y, let me remove kits for this guy's life so he can breathe a little bit. And okay, and I have another object, and I'm just gonna put something here. Let's say X equal to 1 or something. Okay. And what if I do this? Profile Y equal to Y. So I have a key as this Y, and the value is Y. So now if I run this, then I would get Y, which is last, right? Even though I'm trying to get X, because it only has a one you can have one key only, object, which is kind of obscure. So it doesn't really work. So that's why we have maps. And the way maps work is I can create const m. I'm just gonna call m as new map, and it's a constructor. I think this is a capital M. Okay, and it creates an empty map. I look at console log m. Okay, what's the beauty of this is you can see the size. Before in JavaScript objects, you couldn't see the size. Now you can see the size. The second advantage is you have symbol operator, which means you can iterate through. You can use like a for off loop here. So that's the second advantage. Third advantage is you can use object as the keys, which is really cool. Okay. You can also do, so these are all the methods. So it has one method called set. So now let's do the same thing. So I can say m.set, and I want to set name is equal to John or something, right? Now it has set name equal to John, and it's very clear inside here. It's really nice, and you can see the size is 1. If I want to get something, I would have to, it has a method called get. So if I do m.get name, and it should give me back John. Okay, as you can see, it's giving me back John. Okay, what else? Oh yeah, you can also chain it. So remember in that thing, if I want to do multiple, I can say set age is, let's say 30 or 40. Okay, so I can chain it like this. So it would set name and age. So that's nice. And then if I look at it, then you would see, both entries, name and age. It also has, remember in an object we had, what was that method called? Has its own property. I forgot the name of the method now. But here you don't have to do that. You just do has and name. Then it would give you true and false, right? Well, it gives me true here. So that is nice. I can do for off loop. So I can say for let index and value of m dot entries console log index and value, and they should print actually the entire thing. Yeah, you can see name John, age 40, right? So this is right. So a lot of time, I think if you want to use in your project, if you want to use JavaScript object, um, if you want the more stable data structure, then you should use map. And then remember I said you can have key as the object. So let's say if I have const x as an empty object, const y equal to an array. Okay. Const z equal to null. And I can say m dot set x as, let's say, string x dot set y as string y, and z set z as null. Well, let's see what it gives me. All right, so I got empty object x array, empty array y, and null null. And obviously you have the name John. So it gives you more flexibility. Let's say, for example, if you have some result coming in with giant objects and you want to, for test, you want to keep track of each test results, then you can use sets to actually store this as keys, so you can easily compare them. Okay, any questions?
So, what are the main difference between an object and a map?
So as I said, the main object is main difference is obviously syntax, right? You have to use a constructor. In the object, you just use either new object literal, or you can just, or constructor, or just use simple curly brackets, right? That's how you create objects. Then there are no methods like sets. You can just do dot name equal to John. Here you have to use methods. In the regular object, you cannot set these as keys. Okay, here you can use other objects as keys, or even null as keys, right? Which is interesting. You cannot iterate using for off loop. Here you can. You also have length, so I can say I think it's m dot length. Let's try it. Is it length? Hold on. If I
Can you give an example of a scenario where we should use object or a map?
Um,
Because if you have any some scenario, so which
yeah,
data set you should we pick up either an object or a map?
yeah. So a lot of cases where you want to have much giant object with um, let's say like you have a test results coming in, right, of some test, um, where you have the result is actually like some JavaScript objects, right? And then you want to store them, and then you want to give each result a name, right? So
Okay.
the way you so you can use them as a keys, and then you can say result one or something like this, right? Uh, Again, also map doesn't allow anything duplicate keys, right? So um, that also works, right? So anywhere where you want to have you can use object, you can pretty much use maps as well, right? Because they have the same kind of features. It just the syntax is a little different, right? You have to use
Okay.
this kind of
Does it maintain the order of elements
the okay,
in
yeah. So
object?
yeah, so the JavaScript object, it doesn't keep the order of element. Here it would,
Okay.
right? Because you have an iterator, that's why it would. And it also keeps the order the way you actually enter the data in, which is very important.
Hemel, even arrays allow order, right? So all objects that have prototype iterator allow ordering. Is that right?
It doesn't like arrays allows you mean arrays, right? Or objects?
Arrays.
Yeah, arrays have index, right? So yeah, wherever you see the iterator, then you would see that, yeah. But unfortunately, object was like created, I guess, kind of prematurely, so it didn't have a lot of features. Okay. Um, so far in my project, I've actually used maps. A lot of people just go by default using JavaScript object, because that's how people kind of are used to. But I would just say, just try it out. Um, you might be surprised at how. And I think also another thing is, I think maps are faster. I have not compared the speed myself, but I was looking at some documents. Yeah, and also things like, if I want to find a length and things like that, I have to, here I have. Oh, also another thing, I can convert them into arrays. Remember, maps. Um, if I want to convert this map into an array, all I have to do is right. If I did this converts into an array, and then I can, and it, I think, was a table. I forgot. If I then run it, you see, it kind of converts into like a two-dimensional array, right? So it's really nice. Um, yeah, and you can also convert back into it also. But anyway, so that's and I think I could. I'm not sure, but I can convert. For example, if I have, let's say, const profile equal to, let's say, name John. Okay, ages, let's say 10. I'm not sure, I've never done it, but let's try it. Can I do that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, let's see. Yeah, I guess it's not allowing me. I thought give it a try. Should I do this? I don't know. Yeah, I'll find out, but I was trying to find out if I can convert a regular object into map. There must be some way, I'm not sure. I've never tried it. Okay, yeah. But you can convert them into an array using square operator. Okay. All right. Okay, so let's move to CSS. It's 6:19. Okay, let's move to CSS. Okay, I'm just gonna keep recording, and then, all right, so CSS. Okay, so last time we looked at the class. So last time we looked at how we can have HTML elements, and I can actually provide hooks in here like ID equal to name or something, and I can use in CSS that hook. So if I want to use the ID, I have to pound and then name, and then I can add some styles to it, right? So I can say color is red, and it would work like this, right? Let's look at more selectors. So let's say if I want multiple things. So for example, if I have ID 1, 2, and ID 1, something like this, right? And I want them both applied, same color. Then if I just simply write ID 1 and space, not sorry, comma and ID 2, then it would apply the red color to both. So the comma means, wherever I find ID 1, apply the red color, and also find ID 2 wherever I find, apply red color, right? It could be anywhere in the DOM. It doesn't matter. Okay. Remember, the CSS is global. And unless I do specific structure where I can say, okay, I want my parents to be this way or my child to be this way, it will apply everything globally. Okay. You can also do so if I want to say that select all the div elements, okay, well, you know what? Let me do this way instead of this. Where ID 1, well, I should not use ID in that case because ID is unique, so I can class 1. And then I can create another one here somewhere, class 2. But this, instead of ID, it's, let's say, paragraph. Okay. All right. So if I say, give me all the div tags with class 1 and apply red color to it. Oops. And so here, the only combination is this. So they have to be adjacent to each other without any space. Okay. So it applying this one, but not this one. Okay, let's say if I do class 1 here, even though this is class 1, it's not going to apply because I'm saying the same element have to be div tag and also have to have class 1. So here, because the paragraph tag, it's not going to apply here. If I just change it to div tag, then it would apply. Then the both are red. Okay. So that's the second selector. So again, if I do this, which means all the div tags and all the class 1. So it doesn't matter if I have a div here without class, right? It's gonna apply it here because any div and any class 1. Well, I should put a space here. Any div and any class 1, right? So even if I have, and then if I put them together, which means the element has to have div and class 1. Then the last one does not have class 1. That's why. Okay. What if I have a space here? The space means select all the div element. Oh, sorry. Select all the classes inside div. So let's say if I take this guy and then put it here. Okay. So this means any class inside div. So this has to be one of the parents, right? So I believe if I just change this to P, then it won't work, right? Because now the class 1 is not inside P. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's say what else? Hold on, I have to tell my wife she's making a lot of noise. अरे यार आवाज ओछो करे ने आवाज ओछो कर Yeah, sorry guys. Okay. Um, what else? There is another one where you have to have a parent has to be div, which would work the same way, but the other one was if it's just inside, this one the parent has to be, the immediate parent has to be div. So I believe if I just put p inside here, yeah. um, the parent div. Oh, sorry. This one is has to be immediately after. So if I say plus, then it has to be immediately after div. So this guy is div, so then this would work. But for this one, there is no div before, so then it won't work. Not the inside. So this should be immediately after. Okay. Um, and they're like way more, and I can send you a list of them. We can go like on and on. There's like a pseudo selectors and all that stuff. Um, but let's move to any question on this. All right, looks like everybody knows. All right, so let's move to the box model. All right, so one of the most important property in the box model I wanted to cover was also a nice thing in the JS fiddle is if I want to do div with class A, then I would just do this and then tab, and it does this. So it's really nice. Okay. So let's understand the box model again. Um, okay, so in the box model, the border, and again, I'm gonna go. By the way, what do you think of the speed and do you know all this stuff, or I want to know from each of you just so I don't go in the wrong direction.
It's okay if you can speed it up to Emil.
Okay. Anybody else?
It's fine, Emil.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine with me too.
Okay. All right. Um, so in the box model, let's do this. One of the most important property I wanted to cover is, and I'm just going to give you examples so that this might cover it. So remember, in the box model, we have the border, the padding, margin, and what else am I missing? content itself, right? So here, if I look at it, okay. So you have a content, then you have a padding, then you have a border. Now your box size, so when I say width and height, it's based on, it has usually, that usually includes border plus padding plus content. Okay, and this is called content box. There is a property, if I want to look at it, it's called box sizing. If I go box sizing, and you can see here it says content box, and then content box means my box includes my content, the padding, and the border. Now anybody can think of what could be the problem here if my content includes the border, padding, and the content. The reason is, let's say if I have a program that adds a border, let's say if I hover on something and if I add border to it, what would happen? If I add border of, let's say 5 pixels, then it would change the size of the border, of the content itself, right? Which is not a very good thing, because then you would see like everything like moving around, right? Um, and so just really remember, by default, all the boxes includes the border and padding and the content. Okay. Um, so now let's do an experiment. I'm gonna have 3 boxes. Hold on a second. My wife is making noise. All right. So I don't know why. What happened to my mouse? I cannot select anything. This JS filler is going crazy here. Okay. Second. Okay. So first of all, what happens when I do this way? They always pile up. Now let's add some border to it. 1 pixel, that's the size of the border as we looked at it. Solid and red. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want them to be uh, side to each other, right? So if I run right now, I would see the border like this, and by default, it's a display block. We're gonna look at it later on. If I look at the display, well, I have to pick the element first. It's a block, okay? And that is why they are piling up like this, okay? If I want them side by side, what I have to do is I have to change the display. And I have to say inline block. Okay, now if I look at it, what would happen is that before it was taking 100% of the width. Now it doesn't take any 100% of the width. I have to now give it a width, right, and height. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give each block a height and a width. Let's say 50 pixel. Width is also, let's say, 50 pixel. Okay. And we're going to look at this in detail when we do the display property and all that stuff. But I want to show you how the block works. I mean the box model works, right? So now look at the each block. Again, nothing should change, but because now we gave it a width and a height. Before, because it was a display block, it was taking 100% width. Now we are forcing it to have 50 by 50. We have a border of 1, right? But remember, the entire box is 50 because the border is actually inside. Okay, so now I want to also change the border box. No, let's just not change it, and I want to do something else. So when I hover on it, what I want to do is I want to add a border of 10 pixel. And solid and red. Now this doesn't really add anything. This is just a class hover, right? So if I want to really add the styles, what I want to do is there's a event called hover. So when I hover over it, it should add this class. Okay. So to explain that, all right, let me save this, update it. I think my JS builder is really behaving badly today. Okay. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use jQuery. All right, so we can use jQuery. Otherwise, the syntax gets really kind of big. So what I want to do is when I hover on the class A, so I can say dot A, and it has a method called hover. Okay. And inside, I can do two things. I can actually add this class to this element. So I can say function dot this. I don't know if you guys know jQuery or not, otherwise this could be painful. So I can say add class and hover. When I do this, what happens? It would add this hover class, and when it adds the hover class, it adds an extra border, right? So let's run this. Hopefully it should work. Okay. What I want to do is also when I remove it, I also want the it to go back. So we want to remove the class, right? So I can say function And this time I'm gonna remove the class hover. Okay. Now you see how everything kind of moves around. What in order to visualize it, what I'll do is there is a property called vertical align. It's top. So now if I do this, so all the boxes should stay on the top and it will not move. Okay. What is the problem? It's the box is adding extra and everything kind of moving around, right? That is because of that border thing. So what I want to do is that box sizing to be border box. Okay. Now look at it. It doesn't go big. And that is because border is in the border box, border is part of the overall height and width. In the content box, it only considers the padding and the content as part of the width, and the border is outside. So if I add, let's say, 10 pixel border, my content would expand 10 pixel, actually more than 10 pixel, right? Because it would add both sides. And then you would see this expansion here. It doesn't do it. Let's also inspect it to see exactly what's going on. And in order to check it, you see there is a filter called hover. If you do this, you can actually check it. All right. So you see your content is now 30 by 30. Okay. It's no longer 50 by 50 because it has to accommodate this 10 pixel border. So which adds a 20 more pixels, right? But if I remove this line, which means I'm using content box, you can see now it's 50 by 50 and then 10 pixel around. So this is a very important property to remember. Besides the padding and the border and the margin, right? Padding, it adds those pixels inside the box, margin adds outside, right? And before the border, by default, um, the content box, I think I said opposite in the beginning. The content box, the border is outside, but in a border box, the border is inside as a part of the overall content. Um, I wanted to show you this because this is one of the biggest confusion a lot of people have. If you don't understand the box model, then you would see all kind of funny things going on, and you would have no idea what's going on. So I wanted to show you this the box model um, in detail. Okay. Um, Again, a cool trick is if you can actually simulate hover, active, focus, and all that stuff here. So then if you have some styles that is on hover, then you would see it here. Okay, here we are using jQuery to add actually class. We're not using native hover because we haven't gone through the pseudo classes and pseudo so that we don't, but I'll show you when I when I cover that area. And that's why I use jQuery to actually um, so you also know that adding and removing class would adding their styles, right? So here we are adding the styles, and when I mouse out actually, it's removing it, remove the hover class. That's why it's applying this style and removing this style when my mouse goes out. Okay. And I think the same thing you can do with, if I don't have the this, I can same thing I can do again with you see, you can do the same thing by using this hover. Okay, but since we haven't covered, I thought, okay, I should show you how it really works when I use um, jQuery, because you can control much better using jQuery than this. For smaller things where you have a button and you have hovered, you can do this. But if you want to write some code where it does a little bit more complex stuff, then you want to do it in an event, JavaScript event or something like that. Okay. Um, Another thing about border is here we have border this, right? Um, which basically allows all four borders. But I think you can do border. Let me do this. Border. I think it's right color or something like that. Color right? I forgot. Color right. Hold on, let's see. Yeah, border right color. I don't know why is it. Oh, but I have to have width. That's why. Border 1 pixel solid, and then I would have to have a border right color red. Okay, let me close this. So now one side is, well, let me make it 2 here. Make it 10. All right. So now you can see how the border actually really looks. It actually go diagonal here. Okay, so I can have 4 different colors for each border if I want to. Red, green, blue, and yellow or something. And right, left, top, and bottom. Okay. Similarly, you can have border size also. So you can say borders right size. You can pick different sizes for each border. A cool trick is if I have, say, instead of 10, if I have 50, what if I do height is 0 and width is 0? I get 4 triangles. right? So, and you just have to remove the content because all right, yeah. So that's a neat trick. Um, let's say if I wanna have a triangle that I wanna use like an arrow or something, then I can do something like this, and um, then always obviously I have to say like a border. Um, let's do it since we have 5 minutes. So I would say border size is 50 pixel. I think it's a size. And you can always refer to your, if I just go in here, I can always look it up. You see, I have a border, and then width, not size. So VIDTH. Okay. And then border, I think it's type. Type? I think it's style. Border style. Okay. Is solid. Okay. Now I can say what if I make this red? I think there is a transfer. I forgot exactly how to do it, but there is a way to actually. How do you spell transfer? What if I remove this? No, I have to have it. I have to have a CSS transparent background. The color property, I think. Okay, background transparent, I think. Background color. Anyway, I'll find out later exactly. But basically, what you do is you would remove the not the green, but you would remove the colors from. I can remove yellow, and now I have triangle, right? And what I can do is if I make this black transparent, then I would get the green arrow. So that's a nice trick. So if you want an arrow somewhere, you can do that. Okay, I'll find out. I think it's a background color. Yeah. So somehow it's not working right now, but that's a trick. Okay. Um, all right. So I'm hoping that this is not too heavy for you guys. I think it's pretty simple stuff, but when it comes to CSS, you have to practice a lot. You gotta build like small things, practice it, understand how things work, and then when you build a much larger project, then you would your brain would be automatically used to it. I used to do this kind of things so much. When I'm alone, I just play around with it to see exactly how each property really works. Because without that, you probably would never be able to get CSS, because it's quite complex. JavaScript is very easy, okay, because syntax is a little bit easier. CSS, first of all, applies globally, so it's really confusing when some style is overriding some other styles and you don't know what's going on, but with with the JavaScript, it's much easier. Okay, so as a homework, you can try building a triangle. I think one of the color you have to use is a transparent. Okay, but let's see if you can build it. And this is a recorded session, so you can see the code when you play it back. Okay. All right. So we're coming to almost 7 o'clock. So I'm gonna stop here, and then let's see if you have any questions. Everybody's been very quiet, so either they're getting it or they're not.
Hemel, I have a question
Sure.
not related to this. Just wanted to know what does returning a promise mean? I know we can use callbacks and all that. Would like to know technically what does it mean returning a promise, and what does it mean by registering for a callback?
Okay. Returning a promise. So if I have a function, let me say something. If I have a function, okay, and if it basically returns new promise, okay, which means when I execute this function, what do I get?
A promise.
Yes. So then I can simply do this, right? I mean, do you know much about promises?
Yeah, I have been using them, but I don't really know what's happening behind the scenes. I use a resolve and reject to catch them and then write functions.
Okay.
But would like to know more, what does returning actually mean, or what does registering for a callback mean?
Okay. Okay. So I can. Okay. So the callback. So this is how it works, right? So here in this function, I have a promise, right? And it would have resolve and what was that? Reject, right? Two arguments. So these are the callbacks. And again, the reason is confusing. So if you, and it's supposed to be confusing. Promises are very confusing, and that is because you don't see. It's not very linear, right? Right. So think of this way. Um, what if you have if you want to do something that um, you don't know when it's gonna be done, right? So if I told you to, let's say, do the homework, and I don't know when you're gonna finish the homework, right? So what do? You give me a promise. You say, okay, I'm gonna do the homework, right? So um, you give me a promise. Now here I'm actually executing this function, which would be more like check my email to see if it's if he has finished the homework or not, right? So I would check my email to see if the promise is done or not. But then I have to constantly keep checking until I see some results, right? So think of that way. That once somebody gives them a promise, then you can only have two results. either the promise is fulfilled via resolve, or it gets rejected, right? You can manually reject it as well, because let's say if you're supposed to get some data back from the server and you waited for like too long and it's not coming back, right? Because um, you have no idea what's going on the server side. So you can set a timeout. Say, okay, if I don't get it within, let's say, 10 seconds, then it's a reject, right? Which is reasonable. Or you can try it again or something. Um, so within the promise, you would um, you would do something, right? Okay. So let's say if I'm doing something, this could be an AJAX call, right? And it's returned something. Okay. Now when is this going to be returned? Whenever this something is done. But this is fine because it's inside the promise. So if I can say if x is, then I can make a decision based on x. I would just say resolve if x. I can say if x is true, then I can say resolve it. When I resolve it, I would pass some data, right? That data would be received here automatically because you're resolving it. Um, if I reject it, then I would have some status, right? So here I can reject some status, right? That you can, the message that you can actually show it to on your uh, and I can go into detail when we cover it, but think of this way. I have a function. Whenever I call this, then only this promise would run. Until then, this is not running. Basically, I'm giving a promise. When I execute this function x, I'm returning a promise. So until then, I'm not even doing anything, right? So only when I execute this function, what happens? This promise gets triggered. You activate it. Then when you activate this promise, you'll start doing something. And then you wait until this something is done. When this something is done, what happens? This x is returned. Then you say, oh, is this x returned? Then you resolve it. If based on this, if it's true or something, then you resolve it. You can also have some timeout or something, when it doesn't get within this sort of seconds, you reject it. And as soon as you resolve it, this then function would get executed. And what happens when this then function get executed? It would execute this function, and you get this data here, okay? And then you can do whatever with the data. So you can append to some DOM or something, right? If it's rejected, then you get the status here back, and you can also do another thing. You can actually return another promise, right? Right. So what happens here? When you call x, you start executing this promise. Once the promise is finished, and this then function would run, and then I would have some data, and that would trigger another promise. Okay. So what if I call this um, something like this? I can have actually a function also, and then I can y would be a promise, and I can execute it, and then So, are you getting, or are you still confused?
Yeah, I'm getting. So the new promise. So you used a constructor. So what kind of a thing is promise? Where are we getting it from?
Say it again. So, new promise is a constructor. Yes.
Yeah. So it must be defined somewhere. So is it belong? Does it belong to object so that it's available in the file that we're using?
Um, so promise is actually a wrapper. Okay. So have you ever used like a Ajax calls? Like, okay, let me show you.
Yeah, I used Angular calls or jQuery calls. We do a put or get requests.
Yeah. So if you do jQuery, let's say get, for example, right? Get JSON or something. I forgot. Get JSON. Okay. So what happens when you call this? Okay, when you call get JSON, you have some URL, right, that you're trying to get the data from. Um, so what happens is there is a callback function. So whenever this would return some data, so inside this get JSON function, do you know about, do you understand the callback functions very well?
Yeah, only if we get the data, this function is being executed and the data is passed in as an argument of the function, right?
Yes. So the function holds the argument data, right? So when the when it returns the data, this gets executed, right? Now, promise is nothing but a wrapper around it. Think of this way, right? Uh, because the problem with this is, let's say when the data comes, you would have two situations. You can have a reject, when that some sort of rejection could happen here as well, right? Uh, where the data never comes. Then you have to basically say, okay, um, do something when nothing happens or error happens or something like that, right? Which will be a reject kind of thing. But the problem with this is that if I want to make another promise based on the data I received, then I have to call this Ajax function again here, and then it will be like a nested function inside a function.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
which becomes a complex
yeah,
thing.
so it will be a problem. So using promises, you can use dot then, and it's much more readable.
Yeah. So promise. The cool thing about promise is when I return it, right? It's outside. So I'm doing nothing inside here. See, it's a new line here, and I can control it here. Control it here. And that's the thing. Just a wrapper. It doesn't. It basically. I think a lot of people try to understand what is going on inside, right? Uh, and I think it's nothing much than when something happens, you call then function, and then you execute this function where you pass the data from resolve, because this code you have to write, right? And then what happens in then, it just, when something is done, it basically um, returns. I can actually, what I can do is, when I cover maybe in a class or two, I can cover promises, and they I can show you. Are you familiar with um, what is it called? The Like how the stacks um, and event loop works in JavaScript?
No.
Okay, so I think that's what probably you want to understand, which I can. JavaScript event. I think there's a thing called. Okay. This, what you want to do is this. There's a thing called concurrency model. called non-blocking model, which I can show you next time. This is the event loop. Yeah, I can show you. There are lots of blogs on it, but I can show you how it exactly works, right? When the promises comes and how it does all the things, right? Yeah, I can show you next time. Um, Let me prepare some slides so that you would understand it. Now I'll explain promise a little bit better in detail, and we'll have some examples.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Hemant.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Yeah, once you understand promise, have you heard of the async await?
Racing or async?
Async await. The async await. Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay. So this is another wrapper on the top of the promises, and this makes like your asynchronous code look synchronous. I'll cover it after promises. So the one of the other solution is to use async await instead of promises. It uses promises inside, by the way. It returns a promise, but the syntax is very cool. It makes your asynchronous code look synchronous. Okay, but I think before you do anything, we need to understand the event loop. I think that's the trick, right? So once you understand it, then you would know what's going on inside JavaScript, so that you would understand all the async behavior of JavaScript. Okay. So I'll cover the callback functions first before covering this. So maybe next time I'm gonna start with the function anyway, the callback functions and other kind of functions, and then I think class after that I'll start with the promise, because once you understand the callback functions, then you can understand the promise a little bit better. Okay.
Yes, Hemant. Thanks a lot.
Hey, yeah, no problem. All right, so guys, um, so yeah, as a homework, just try to do um, that element, make it a triangle using CSS, and without looking a solution outside in the Google, on the Google. Okay. Yeah, and then I'll see you guys on Sunday.
All right. See you on Sunday. Have a good night.
All right. Hey, have a good night.
Have a good day.
Hey, have a good night.
Thank you.